She was about to give birth, and the doctor was her ex-husband. Then he did something unbelievable. A greatest ever story for my beautiful family. Stay with me till the end, because this one will touch your hearts forever. Hi, my beautiful family. Today I lift my heart in prayer for you all. May God bless every woman with unshakable strength, radiant dignity, and a heart overflowing with love. May every man be guided with wisdom, patience, and courage, and every child grow in joy, protection, and light. May your homes be filled with peace, your days with hope, and your nights with calm and blessings. I pray that every woman feels honored, every man feels inspired, and every child feels safe and cherished. May challenges turn into triumphs, every sorrow into hope, and every dream into reality. May your families be bound by love, your hearts be full, and your lives shine with God's endless grace. My beautiful family, you are the heart of this journey, the reason I share every story, and the blessing I hold most dear. If your heart is with me, right, present. If your love is true, right. I am with Mr. Peter. Some people say love dies when you stop fighting for it, but Carol Simon knew the truth. Love dies when only one person is left fighting alone. She stood in the doorway of their bedroom, watching Ricky Fowler fold his surgical scrubs and pack them into the same worn leather bag he'd carried since medical school. The dinner she'd spent 2 hours preparing sat untouched on their dining table, the candle she'd lit now reduced to pools of wax. This was the third night in a row. Actually, if she was being honest with herself, it was more than that. It was every night this month and most of the month before. "You're leaving again," Carol said, her voice flat. It wasn't a question. Ricky didn't look up from his packing. "There's a surgery scheduled for midnight. Complex valve replacement. The patient specifically requested me. They always specifically request you. Because I'm good at what I do, Carol." He zipped the bag with a sharp motion. "This is what you signed up for when you married a surgeon." Carol felt something crack inside her chest, a hairline fracture that had been spreading for months. "I signed up to marry a man who loved me, not a ghost who sleeps here sometimes." That made him pause. He finally turned to look at her, and she saw the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. Ricky Fowler was a beautiful man, strong jaw, deep brown eyes that had once looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. And those eyes just looked tired. "That's not fair," he said quietly. "Fair?" Carol laughed, and it came out bitter. "You want to talk about fair? I made your favorite meal tonight. I bought that wine you love. I wore the dress you said made me look like sunshine. And you know why?" He didn't answer, because today is our anniversary. 4 years, Ricky. We've been married for 4 years, and you forgot. She watched the realization hit him like a physical blow. His hand went to his forehead, and he closed his eyes. "Carol, don't!" She held up her hand. "Don't apologize. I'm so tired of apologies that don't mean anything. They do mean something." His voice rose, defensive now. "I'm out there saving lives, Carol. Actual lives. People who would die without me. And what about me?" The words burst out of her raw and desperate. "What about my life? Do you know what I did today? I woke up alone. I ate breakfast alone. I went to work at the library and came home alone. I cooked alone. I sat at that table alone, staring at your empty chair, telling myself that maybe tonight would be different. That maybe tonight my husband would remember that I exist." Ricky set his bag down. "That's not fair. You know how demanding this career is. You knew that when we got married. I knew you were a surgeon. I didn't know I was signing up to be a widow to a man who's still alive." The silence that followed was suffocating. Carol could hear the clock ticking in the hallway, each second a reminder of all the time they'd wasted, all the moments they'd never get back. "I'm doing this for us," Ricky said finally, "to build our future, to give us security. We don't need security, Ricky. We need each other." Carol's voice broke. "When was the last time we had dinner together? When was the last time we talked about something other than your surgeries or your patients? When was the last time you looked at me and really saw me?" He opened his mouth to respond, but his phone buzzed. They both looked at it lying on the dresser. The screen lit up with a message from the hospital. "Don't," Carol whispered. Please don't look at that phone right now. But his hand was already reaching for it. Muscle memory? Pavlovian response. The hospital called and Ricky Fowler answered. Every single time. Carol felt something inside her break completely. Not a crack this time, but a clean snap. If you pick up that phone right now, I'm done. His hand froze halfway to the device. Carol, someone's life could be, what about mine? Her voice rose to a scream. What about my life, Ricky? Doesn't that count? Doesn't it matter at all? You're being dramatic. The words hit her like a slap. Dramatic, as if her pain was theater. As if her loneliness was a performance. As if 4 years of sleeping alone, eating alone, existing alone in a marriage meant she was being unreasonable for wanting her husband to stay home on their anniversary. You're right, Carol said, and her voice went deadly calm. I am being dramatic. I'm being a hysterical woman who expects her husband to care about her. How silly of me. She walked to their closet and pulled out a suitcase. Her hands were steady as she began taking clothes off hangers. Ricky watched her frozen. What are you doing? What does it look like? She folded a sweater carefully, precisely. I'm leaving. Carol, stop. Let's talk about this. We've been talking about this for months, Ricky. I've begged you to spend time with me. I've cried. I've pleaded. I've tried to be understanding. But I'm done understanding. I'm done being patient. I'm done being invisible. She moved to the dresser and pulled out her undergarments, her pajamas, the simple cotton clothes she wore when she was home alone. Which was always. Ricky stepped toward her. You're overreacting. I'll make it up to you. I promise. How many promises have you broken? Carol zipped the suitcase closed. How many dinners? How many birthdays? How many nights did I fall asleep crying, waiting for you to come home? My patients need me. I need you. The words tore out of her throat. I'm your wife, Ricky. Doesn't that mean anything anymore? He looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. And maybe she was. Maybe the language of loneliness, of abandonment, of loving someone who had already left you emotionally, even while they still slept in your bed. Maybe that was something he'd never learned to understand. Where will you go? He asked finally. My sister's. Carol picked up the suitcase. It was surprisingly light. She'd thought packing up a life would be heavier. Bernice has been telling me for months that I deserve better than this. I should have listened. Carol, please, don't do this. I love you. She stopped at the doorway and turned to look at him one last time. Really look at him. At the man she'd married, the man who'd promised to love and cherish her, the man who'd held her on their wedding day and whispered that she was his whole world. When did you last show me? Her voice was barely a whisper. When did you last choose me over a surgery? When did you last hold me? When did you last kiss me like you meant it? Love isn't just a word, Ricky. It's action. It's presence. It's showing up. And you stopped showing up for me a long time ago. His phone buzzed again, insistent, demanding. Carol laughed softly, tears streaming down her face. There's your answer, even now. Even as I'm walking out the door, you're looking at that phone. Someone's life is on the line. So is ours. She picked up her purse from the hook by the door. But you've already made your choice, haven't you? She walked down the hallway, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She passed the dining room, where their anniversary dinner sat cold and forgotten. She passed the photos on the wall, their wedding day, their honeymoon. Happier times when his smile reached his eyes and hers wasn't painted on. Her hand was on the front doorknob when she heard his voice behind her. Carol, wait. Let me explain. She turned one last time. There's nothing left to explain, Ricky. You made your choice every single day for 4 years. You chose your career. You chose your patience. You chose your reputation. You just never chose me. I can change. I can do better. You've been saying that for months. Carol opened the door. The night air rushed in, cool and liberating. Maybe you can change. Maybe you'll meet someone else someday, and you'll figure out how to balance work and love. But I can't wait around to find out. I can't keep breaking my own heart, hoping you'll learn to care about the pieces. Please don't go. Carol stepped through the doorway into the night. Goodbye, Ricky. She walked to her car without looking back. If she looked back, she'd see him standing in the doorway. If she looked back, she might lose her nerve. If she looked back, she might run back into his arms and accept another empty apology, another broken promise, another year of being alone in a marriage. So she didn't look back. She got in her car, started the engine, and drove away from the only home she'd known for 4 years. Drove away from the man she loved more than breathing. Drove away from the life she'd thought they'd build together. Behind her, through the rearview mirror, she saw the light from their bedroom window. She saw Ricky's silhouette, and then she saw him turn away, back into the house, his phone already pressed to his ear. Even as she was leaving, the hospital was calling him back. Carol drove through tear-blurred streets to her sister's apartment across town. Bernice answered the door in her bathrobe, took one look at Carol's face, and pulled her inside without a word. She held Carol while she sobbed, while 4 years of loneliness and pain poured out in broken gasps. "I left him," Carol whispered into her sister's shoulder. "I finally left him." "Good," Bernice said fiercely. "You should have done it months ago." "I loved him so much." "I know, baby. I know. Why wasn't I enough? Why couldn't he just love me back?" Bernice pulled back and looked at her sister with tears in her own eyes. "You were always enough, Carol. He was the one who wasn't." That night, Carol lay in Bernice's guest room staring at the ceiling. Her phone sat silent on the nightstand. No calls, no texts, no frantic messages begging her to come home. The silence was more painful than any argument would have been, because it confirmed what she'd already known deep down. Ricky Fowler would sleep just fine tonight. He'd go to his surgery. He'd save his patient. He'd come home to their empty house, and maybe he'd feel a twinge of regret. But tomorrow, he'd wake up and go back to the hospital, and the rhythm of his life wouldn't change at all. She was the only one whose world had ended tonight. Carol closed her eyes and placed her hand over her heart, feeling it beat steady and strong despite the pain. She'd spent 4 years dimming her own light to accommodate his. 4 years making herself smaller so his career could be bigger. 4 years dying slowly while he saved everyone else. "Never again," she whispered to the darkness. But even as she said it, even as she made that promise to herself, a tiny part of her hoped her phone would ring, hoped Ricky would realize what he'd lost, hoped he'd choose her just once. The phone stayed silent, and somewhere across town, Ricky Fowler stood in their empty house, holding the wedding ring Carol had left on the kitchen counter, wondering when exactly he'd let the most important thing in his life walk away. Chapter 2. When the light goes out. The morning came too bright and too cruel. Carol woke in Bernice's guest room with swollen eyes and a hollow feeling in her chest, like someone had scooped out her insides and left her empty. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed over her in waves. The fight, the suitcase, the drive through tear-blurred streets. She'd left her husband. Bernice knocked softly and entered with coffee and toast. "You don't have to talk about it if you're not ready. I need to file for divorce." Carol's voice came out steady, surprising them both. "Today, before I lose my nerve." "Are you sure? Maybe you two just need some time apart. Maybe counseling." "He had 4 years to change, Bernie. 4 years of me begging for scraps of his attention. I'm done waiting for him to decide I'm worth his time." Her sister sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand. "You see, Satin." "Okay, I'll go with you to the lawyer's office." They went that afternoon. Carol signed papers with a surprisingly steady hand. Watched the lawyer explain terms she barely heard. Community property, asset division, irreconcilable differences. Such clinical words for the death of love. The lawyer asked if she expected the divorce to be contested. "No," Carol said quietly. "He won't fight for me. He never has." She was right. When the papers were served to Ricky at the hospital, he signed them within a week. No phone call, no attempt at reconciliation. Just his signature on the dotted line and a check for half of everything they'd owned. He didn't even ask to see her. The finality of it broke something in Carol that she hadn't known could break. She'd left him, yes, but some foolish part of her had hoped he'd fight, hoped he'd show up at Bernice's door and beg her to come home, hoped he'd finally choose her. Instead, he'd chosen the easy way out. just like he'd always done. Bernice found her crying in the bathroom one night, the divorce papers clutched in her hand. "Who didn't even try?" Carol sobbed. "4 years of marriage, and he just let me go without a fight." "Then he's a fool," Bernice said fiercely. "And you're better off without him." But Carol didn't feel better. She felt hollowed out. She felt like a ghost of herself. Across town, Ricky Fowler was having his own reckoning with loss. He came home after a grueling surgery to a house that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. Carol's absence was everywhere. In the empty closet, in the kitchen where she used to cook, in the living room where she used to curl up with books. He'd thought the silence would be peaceful. Instead, it was deafening. His colleagues at the hospital noticed the change in him. Dr. Yates, his mentor, pulled him aside after a routine procedure. "Ricky, you look like hell. When's the last time you slept?" "I sleep fine. You sleep here. I've seen you in the on-call room more nights than not." "What's going on?" "Nothing. I'm just focused on work." Dr. Yates studied him with the kind of knowing look that made Ricky want to walk away. "This is about your wife, isn't it?" "I heard she left." "Ex-wife," Ricky corrected automatically. "The divorce was finalized last week, and you're handling it by working yourself into the ground?" "I'm handling it fine." But he wasn't handling it fine. At night he lay in their bed, his bed now, and reached for her in his sleep. He'd wake up to emptiness and remember all over again that she was gone. Some mornings he'd find himself making 2 cups of coffee out of habit, only to realize he was alone. He threw himself into his career with renewed intensity. If he worked hard enough, long enough, maybe he could stop thinking about how she'd look standing in that doorway. Maybe he could stop hearing her voice asking, "What about my life?" The hospital became his refuge. Surgery was clean, logical, solvable. You opened someone up, fixed what was broken, and closed them back up. If only marriages worked the same way. His reputation grew. Patients specifically requested him. Other doctors sought his opinions on complex cases. Dr. Yates recommended him for chief of cardiac surgery. Ricky Fowler was on track to become one of the youngest department chiefs in the hospital's history. But success tasted like ash in his mouth. One evening, he stayed late reviewing patient charts in his office. The building grew quiet around him, empty hallways echoing with his solitude. On his desk was a framed photo he kept meaning to take down. Him and Carol on their wedding day, her smile radiant, his arm around her waist like he'd never let go. He picked up the photo and traced her face with his finger. When had he stopped seeing her smile like that? When had her light dimmed? And why hadn't he noticed until it was too late? His phone buzzed with a patient update. He answered it immediately, grateful for the distraction. Work was easier than memory. Patients were easier than feelings. The operating room was easier than facing what he'd lost. Months passed in a blur of surgeries and solitude. Carol slowly began rebuilding her life. She threw herself into her work at the library, finding comfort in the quiet rhythm of books and patrons. She started attending a support group for divorced women that Bernice had found. At first, she sat in the back and said nothing, but gradually she began to share. "I think the hardest part," she told the group one evening, "is knowing I still love him. Even after everything, even after he chose his career over me 1,000 times. I still love him, and that makes me feel so stupid." An older woman named Patricia reached across the circle and squeezed her hand. "Love doesn't turn off like a light switch, honey. You can't hate yourself for having a heart. How do you stop, though? How do you stop loving someone who's no good for you?" Patricia smiled sadly. "You don't stop loving them. You just start loving yourself more." Carol thought about those words as she lay in bed that night. Start loving yourself more. What did that even mean? She'd spent 4 years making herself smaller, dimming her own light so Ricky's could shine brighter. She'd sacrificed her own happiness for a man who barely noticed she was alive. Never again. She made a promise to herself that night. No more waiting for someone else to make her feel whole. No more sacrificing her own needs for someone else's ambitions. No more being invisible. But even as she made those promises, late at night when she couldn't sleep, she'd find herself wondering about Ricky. Was he eating properly? Was he sleeping? Did he ever think about her? Did he miss her at all? Her phone never rang with his number. He never reached out. Not once. The silence hurt worse than any words could have. One evening, Carol ran into someone from the hospital at the grocery store, a nurse named Janet, who'd always been kind to her when she used to visit Ricky at work. "Carol, how are you?" "I'm good," Carol lied with a practiced smile. "How are things at the hospital?" Janet's expression turned sympathetic. "I heard about you and Dr. Fowler. I'm so sorry. It's for the best. Is it, though?" Janet shifted her grocery basket. "I mean, I probably shouldn't say this, but he's different now, colder. He works himself half to death. Never smiles, never takes a break. It's like he's trying to outrun something." Carol's heart clenched. "That's not my problem anymore." I know. I just thought you should know that he's not exactly thriving without you." After Janet left, Carol stood in the cereal aisle and cried, because knowing Ricky was suffering didn't make her feel vindicated. It just made her sad. Sad for both of them. Sad for what they'd had and lost. Sad for two people who'd loved each other once and somehow let it slip away. That night, she pulled out the box she'd hidden under Bernice's guest bed. Inside were mementos from her marriage, photos, love letters from when they were dating, ticket stubs from movies they'd seen together. She looked at a photo of them on their honeymoon, both of them grinning at the camera like they held the whole world in their hands. "We were so happy once," she whispered to the photo. "When did we forget how to be happy?" She put the box away and made another promise to herself. She would move forward. She would heal. She would build a life that made her happy, even if Ricky wasn't in it. But healing was harder than she'd anticipated. The divorce was final, the papers were signed. They'd divided their possessions like they were dismantling a corporation rather than a marriage. Yet emotionally, she was still tethered to him, still hoping he'd call, still waiting for him to fight for her. Bernice caught her staring at her phone one evening. "He's not going to call, sweetie." "I know. Do you? Because you keep looking at that phone like it holds the secrets to the universe." Carol set the phone down. "I just don't understand how he could let me go so easily. Like I meant nothing. Like 4 years together meant nothing." "Maybe that's his way of coping," Bernice said gently. "Some people run toward pain. Others run away from it. Ricky's a runner. And what am I? You're a fighter. You're fighting to survive this. Fighting to heal, fighting to remember who you are without him." Bernice sat beside her sister. "And you're winning, Carol. Every day you get up and move forward, you're winning." Carol wanted to believe that. She wanted to feel strong and independent and healed. But mostly, she just felt broken. Time moved forward, whether she was ready or not. Seasons changed. The divorce became old news. Friends stopped asking how she was doing with that pitying look in their eyes. Life, as it always does, continued, and somewhere across town, Ricky Fowler stood in an empty house, holding a coffee mug Carol had bought him years ago, wondering when exactly he'd become a man who had everything he'd worked for and nothing that mattered. Chapter 3. Rebuilding on Broken Ground. Time proved to be both a healer and a liar. Carol woke up one morning and realized she'd gone an entire day without thinking about Ricky. The ache in her chest dulled from sharp agony to a manageable throb, like a bruise finally starting to fade. The library became her sanctuary. Mrs. Henderson, the head librarian, offered her additional responsibilities. Soon, Carol was organizing reading programs, hosting book clubs, creating displays that brought literature to life. "You have a gift," Mrs. Henderson told her. "You make books feel alive." "Books saved me," Carol said simply. "When I felt invisible in my own life, I could disappear into stories and feel seen." Mrs. Henderson squeezed her shoulder. "You're not invisible anymore, dear." She started attending the divorced women's support group regularly. These women understood her in ways her married friends couldn't. They knew the particular pain of loving someone who couldn't love you back the way you needed. Patricia, the older woman who'd become Carol's mentor, invited her to lunch one afternoon. I was married for 28 years, Patricia said. 28 years of waiting for my husband to notice me. He was absent, emotionally absent. What made you finally leave? I woke up one morning and didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. I'd erased myself so completely that I'd forgotten who I was. Patricia looked at Carol with knowing eyes. Sound familiar? Carol nodded, tears threatening. Every word. You can't make someone see you. All you can do is cherish yourself enough to walk away from people who make you feel small. Patricia reached across the table. You're going to be free. Carol turned that word over in her mind. Was she free? The divorce was final, but she was still carrying Ricky around like a weight in her chest. That needed to change. She rearranged Bernice's guest room, making it feel like her own space. She bought plants for the windowsill. She hung artwork that made her smile. Bernice noticed the shift. You seem different lately, lighter somehow. I'm trying to remember who I was before I became Mrs. Ricky Fowler. And who was that? I used to paint. I used to love painting. You were good at it too. I stopped when we got married. Ricky said the paint fumes gave him headaches. I told myself I'd start again later, but later never came. That weekend, Carol bought basic art supplies. That night, she painted for the first time in years. Her hands shook at first, but then muscle memory took over. She painted abstract shapes that felt like emotions, blues and grays for sadness, bursts of yellow for hope, dark reds for anger. When she stepped back at midnight, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, proud of herself. Meanwhile, Ricky Fowler was discovering that success was a poor substitute for happiness. He'd been promoted to chief of cardiac surgery, the youngest in the hospital's history. There was a ceremony, congratulations from colleagues. Everyone clapped. He felt nothing. Dr. Yates pulled him aside. You did it, Ricky. Everything you've worked for. I am, Ricky lied. You look like a man at a funeral, not a promotion. It all felt hollow. He'd climbed the mountain and discovered the view was empty. All those hours he'd worked, all those dinners he'd missed, he'd told himself it was for their future, his and Carol's, but Carol was gone. And the future he'd sacrificed everything for felt like a punishment. The other surgeons started calling him the machine. Ricky Fowler never got emotional, never hesitated, never made mistakes. He was precise, clinical, perfect. But perfection was lonely. One evening he ran into a woman in the parking lot. She'd dropped her files and papers were scattering. He helped her gather them. Thank you so much, she said, laughing. This has been the day from hell. Her name was Tatiana Desmond, and she worked for a pharmaceutical company. You're Dr. Fowler, she said. I've heard about you. They say you're the best cardiac surgeon in the city. I do my job. Modesty. I like that, she smiled. Let me buy you a coffee. As a thank you. He should have said no, but the thought of another night alone with his thoughts made him say yes. They talked for an hour. Tatiana was smart, successful, driven. She understood demanding careers. When they parted, she gave him her card. He called her the next week. Their relationship developed slowly, almost clinically. Tatiana didn't demand his time or attention. They saw each other when schedules aligned. Dinner here, a gallery opening there. It wasn't love, but it was companionship. Dr. Yates raised an eyebrow when he saw them together. Moving on, I see. Does she make you happy? Happy wasn't the right word. She's good company. That's not what I asked. But happiness felt like something from another life, something he'd had once with Carol and lost. One evening, Tatiana noticed a photo he'd forgotten to put away, him and Carol on their wedding day. Is this your ex-wife? Yes. What happened? I chose my career over her, every single day, until she finally realized I was never going to choose her. Well, lucky for you, I don't need to be chosen. I've got my own career to focus on. Tatiana smiled. No pressure, no drama. It should have felt perfect. Instead, it felt empty. But empty was better than painful. So Ricky told himself this was enough. Across town, Carol was having her own encounter with possibility. A man approached her at the library while she hung new artwork. "That's beautiful work," he said. "You have great taste." "Thank you. I'm trying to bring more local art into the space." "I'm Jerome Whitlock. I do restoration work." He was handsome in an easy way, warm smile, kind eyes, the opposite of Ricky's intense energy. They talked about art, about the neighborhood. When he asked if she'd like to get dinner sometime, Carol hesitated. She wasn't sure she was ready. But Bernice's words echoed, "You can't let one man ruin you for all the good ones." "Okay," Carol said. "Dinner sounds nice." Jerome took her to a small restaurant with candlelight. He asked about her life, her dreams. He listened. He didn't check his phone once. "I'd really like to see you again, Carol." "I'd like that too." And she meant it. Jerome felt safe, comfortable, present, all the things Ricky had never been. Over the next few weeks, they saw each other regularly. Jerome brought flowers. He showed up when he said he would. He made her feel valued, seen. Bernice was thrilled. "He seems wonderful, Carol." Carol smiled, but something felt off. Jerome was perfect on paper, everything she'd wanted from Ricky and never got. So why did she still feel like something was missing? She pushed the feeling aside. This was good. This was moving forward. She was done looking back. Chapter 4. The Storm Inside. Carol had been seeing Jerome for several months when she realized something was wrong with her body. She'd been tired lately, more tired than usual. Her breasts were tender. She'd missed her cycle, but she'd chalked that up to stress. Her divorce hadn't been finalized that long ago. Her body was probably still adjusting to the emotional turmoil. But when the nausea started, persistent and unrelenting, she couldn't ignore it anymore. She bought a pregnancy test on her lunch break, hiding it in her purse like contraband. She took it in the library bathroom, hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it steady. 3 minutes later, 2 pink lines appeared. Pregnant. Carol sat on the closed toilet lid, staring at the test, her mind a tornado of thoughts. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't supposed to happen. She and Jerome had been careful, mostly. There'd been that one night a couple months ago when they'd been caught up in the moment and hadn't thought about consequences. She was going to have a baby. Jerome's baby. Terror and wonder crashed over her in equal waves. She'd always wanted children. She and Ricky had talked about it, back when they were happy. But this wasn't how it was supposed to happen. She was barely divorced, barely financially stable, barely holding her life together. And yet, a tiny part of her felt something like joy. A baby. A second chance at building a family. Maybe this was exactly what she needed to truly move forward, to create something new and beautiful from the ashes of her old life. She took several more tests over the next few days. All positive. When she finally went to a doctor to confirm, she was already 8 weeks along. "Everything looks healthy," the doctor said, showing her the ultrasound screen. "See that flicker? That's the heartbeat." Carol stared at the tiny flutter on the screen and burst into tears. "That's my baby," she whispered. "That's your baby," the doctor confirmed gently. "Congratulations." Now came the hard part, telling Jerome. She invited him over for dinner at Bernice's apartment. Bernice had agreed to stay late at work to give them privacy. Carol cooked his favorite meal, set the table carefully, rehearsed what she'd say a dozen times. When Jerome arrived, he kissed her cheek and held up a bottle of wine. "Brought your favorite." "Actually, I can't drink that." Carol took the bottle and set it aside. "Jerome, we need to talk." Something in her tone made him stiffen. "That sounds ominous." "Sit down, please." They sat at the small dining table. Carol folded her hands in front of her, suddenly unable to meet his eyes. "I'm pregnant." The silence stretched so long it became painful. When she finally looked up, Jerome's face was unreadable. "You're sure?" "Positive. I've been to a doctor. I'm 8 weeks along." 8 weeks? He ran his hand through his hair. "How did this happen?" "The usual way," Carol said, her voice sharper than intended. "Remember that night I know. He stood up, pacing. This is a lot, Carol. "I know it is. It's a lot for me too, but Jerome, I'm having this baby. I want you to know that up front. This is happening." Of course you should keep it if that's what you want." He wasn't looking at her. "I just need some time to process this." "I understand. Take all the time you need." But something in his voice sent a chill through her. Something in the way he wouldn't meet her eyes. Over the next few weeks, Jerome's behavior changed in subtle ways. He called less often. His texts became shorter, less frequent. When they did see each other, he seemed distracted, always checking his phone, always with one foot out the door. "Is everything okay?" Carol asked one evening when he cut their date short for the 3rd time in a row. "Yeah, just busy with work. You know how it is." But she did know. She knew this pattern. She'd lived it with Ricky. The slow withdrawal. The emotional distance masquerading as external circumstances. She'd hoped things would be different with Jerome. She'd believed he was different. She was wrong. One night, Bernice found Carol crying in her room, staring at the ultrasound photo. "What happened?" "He's pulling away. I can feel it. He says he's busy, but I know better. He doesn't want this baby, doesn't want me." "Did he say that?" "He doesn't have to say it. I can see it in his eyes. Every time he looks at me now, I see panic." Carol wiped her tears angrily. "Why do I keep choosing men who leave?" "You didn't choose this, honey. You can't blame yourself for someone else's cowardice." But Carol did blame herself. She blamed herself for being naive enough to trust again, for believing Jerome was different, for thinking she deserved happiness. The breaking point came when Carol was 12 weeks along. She'd called Jerome to tell him about her latest appointment, about how the doctor said everything was developing perfectly, about how she could hear the heartbeat clearly now. His phone went straight to voicemail, then again, and again. She drove to his apartment, something telling her she needed to see him face to face. His car was in the parking lot, so she knew he was home. She knocked on his door for 5 minutes before he finally answered. "Carol, this isn't a good time." "Make it a good time, Jerome. We need to talk." He reluctantly let her in. The apartment was a mess, boxes everywhere, half-packed suitcases on the couch. "What's going on? Are you moving?" "Carol, I was going to call you." "When? After you disappeared?" He had the decency to look ashamed. "There's someone else. We've been talking for a few weeks now. She's in another city. I'm moving to be with her." Carol felt like she'd been punched. "You're leaving. You're leaving me pregnant and alone, and you're running off with someone else." "It's not like that." "Then what is it like, Jerome? Explain it to me. Make it make sense." "I'm not ready to be a father, Carol. I'm not ready for this kind of responsibility. And this other woman, she doesn't want kids. She wants to travel, experience life. She wants the same things I want." "And what about what I want? What about this baby?" "I never asked for this." His voice rose, defensive. "You can't trap me with a baby I never agreed to have." The words hit like slaps. "Trap you? You think I planned this? You think I wanted to be pregnant and abandoned?" "I'll send you money. For the baby, I'll help financially." "I don't want your money, Jerome. I wanted you to be here. I wanted you to care. I can't give you what you want, Carol. I'm sorry." She left without another word, drove back to Bernice's apartment with tears streaming down her face, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. When she walked in, Bernice took one look at her and knew. "He's gone," Carol whispered. "He's leaving me. The baby. All of it." Bernice held her while she sobbed. "You're going to be okay. You and this baby. You're going to be just fine." "How? How am I going to do this alone?" "You're stronger than you think. And you're not alone. You have me." But even Bernice's love couldn't fill the hole Jerome had left. Carol felt like a fool. Again. She'd trusted again, loved again, opened her heart again, and again she'd been abandoned. That night she placed her hand on her growing belly and whispered, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you're going to have a mother who can't seem to get love right." The baby kicked for the first time, a flutter so faint she almost missed it. But it was there, proof of life, proof that even in darkness something beautiful could still grow. Meanwhile, Ricky's relationship with Tatiana was unraveling in its own quiet way. They'd been together for nearly a year when she started cancelling plans more frequently. "Work emergencies," she said. "Last-minute meetings. Important clients." Ricky understood. He'd used those same excuses with Carol countless times, but then he saw her at a restaurant with another man. They looked intimate, comfortable, like they'd known each other a long time. When she saw Ricky watching, she didn't look guilty, just caught. She came to his house the next day to end things. No preamble, no softening the blow. "I've been seeing someone else," she said simply. "Harold Pennington. He's in private equity. We met at a conference a few months ago. And you didn't think to tell me?" "We were never exclusive, Ricky. We both knew what this was." "What was it exactly?" "Convenient, comfortable, but not forever." She collected the few things she'd left at his house. "Harold wants commitment. He wants to get married, have a real partnership. He's ready for that, and I'm not." Tatiana looked at him with something like pity. "Are you? Be honest, Ricky. You're still in love with your ex-wife. I've known it from day one. You're just using me to avoid dealing with that." Her words stung because they were true. "I'm sorry. Don't be. We both got what we needed from this. But now it's run its course." She paused at the door. "For what it's worth, you should call her. Your ex, tell her how you feel. Life's too short to waste on regrets." After she left, Ricky sat in his empty house and thought about Carol. Not for the first time, but maybe for the first time honestly. He'd spent 3 years trying to forget her. 3 years burying himself in work and empty relationships. 3 years running from the truth. He missed her. Not just the idea of her, but her specifically. Her laugh, her kindness, the way she used to look at him like he hung the moon, the way she'd leave notes in his lunch bag, the way she'd curl up beside him at night. He picked up his phone a dozen times to call her, to tell her he'd been wrong, that he was sorry, that he'd give anything for another chance. But what right did he have? He'd destroyed their marriage. He'd chosen his career over her 1,000 times. Why would she ever forgive him? He put the phone down. Some mistakes were too big to fix. Dr. Yates found him in his office late one night, staring at nothing. "Tatiana dump you?" "How'd you know?" "Hospital gossip. Also, you look like hell." Dr. Yates sat down across from him. "Can I give you some unsolicited advice?" "Like I could stop you." "You're a brilliant surgeon, Ricky. The best I've ever trained. But you're a miserable human being." Ricky laughed bitterly. "Tell me how you really feel." "I'm serious. You've achieved everything you set out to achieve professionally. But what's it worth if you're alone? If you're unhappy? If you can't even remember what it feels like to actually live instead of just survive? What am I supposed to do? I destroyed my marriage. Carol's moved on. I don't get a second chance. Maybe not with her. But you get a second chance at being a better man, at learning from your mistakes, at not making the same errors with the next person." Dr. Yates stood to leave. "Or you can keep doing what you're doing, working yourself to death, maintaining relationships that mean nothing, pretending you're fine. But we both know you're not." After he left, Ricky looked at the photo of him and Carol he still kept in his desk drawer. They looked so young, so hopeful, so certain their love would be enough. He'd been so stupid, so arrogant. So convinced that success would bring happiness, all it had brought him was this: an empty office, an empty house, an empty life. He closed the drawer and went back to work. It was all he had left. Chapter 5. When Comfort Becomes Cage. Carol's pregnancy progressed through seasons of change. Physical, emotional, and spiritual, she watched her body transform in ways that were both miraculous and terrifying. Her belly grew round and full. Her breasts ached. Her back hurt constantly. She developed a waddle she found humiliating but couldn't control. Some mornings she woke up and barely recognized the woman in the mirror. But worse than the physical changes were the emotional ones. She felt utterly alone. Jerome had sent exactly 3 payments before the checks stopped coming. She'd tried calling him, but his number had been disconnected. He'd vanished from her life as completely as if he'd never existed, leaving nothing but a growing belly and broken promises. Carol continued working at the library as long as she could, but exhaustion plagued her. Mrs. Henderson found her asleep at her desk one afternoon, head on her arms, looking so small and tired that the older woman's heart broke. "Carol, honey, you need to slow down." "I can't afford to slow down. I've got medical bills piling up, baby things to buy. I can't survive on part-time hours." "You also can't survive by working yourself into the ground." Mrs. Henderson sat beside her. "Have you looked into assistance programs? There's no shame in accepting help when you need it." Carol had looked, had filled out applications, had swallowed her pride and asked for help. But the waiting lists were long, the requirements complex, the process humiliating. She'd spent hours in government offices, sitting in hard plastic chairs, clutching forms and proof of income, feeling like a failure. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. She was supposed to have a partner, supposed to have support, supposed to be excited about bringing a new life into the world, not terrified about how she'd afford diapers. Bernice did everything she could. She'd converted her second bedroom into a nursery, painting the walls soft yellow, assembling a crib she'd found at a yard sale, hanging curtains with tiny stars. But Bernice worked full-time too. She couldn't be everything Carol needed. "I feel like such a burden," Carol told her sister one evening. "You're not a burden. You're my sister. You're family. I'm a single, pregnant, broke divorcee living in your spare room. That's basically the definition of a burden." "Stop it!" Bernice's voice was fierce. "You're a woman who trusted the wrong men. You're a woman who's survived abandonment twice and is still standing. You're a woman who's growing a human being inside her body while working full-time. You're a warrior, Carol, not a burden." But Carol didn't feel like a warrior. She felt like she was drowning. Her pregnancy started showing complications around the 20-week mark. Her blood pressure was elevated. The doctor used words like preeclampsia risk and high risk. Pregnancy and close monitoring, Carol, added medical appointments to her already overwhelming schedule. Money became a constant source of anxiety. The medical bills from her divorce still haunted her. Now she had prenatal care, specialist appointments, ultrasounds, medications. She'd lie awake at night doing calculations in her head. How much she earned, how much she spent, how much she'd need when the baby came. The numbers never added up to enough. She stopped buying new maternity clothes, making do with stretched-out old shirts and elastic-waisted pants. She stopped going out with the few friends who still invited her places. She stopped buying anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. Every penny went into a jar labeled baby fund. By her 3rd trimester, she'd saved less than she'd hoped and more than she'd feared she could manage. The baby kicked constantly now. Sometimes Carol would sit with her hands on her belly, feeling the movements, talking to the life inside her. "I'm sorry I can't give you everything you deserve. I'm sorry your father doesn't want to know you. I'm sorry you're going to have a mother who's barely hanging on. But I promise you this, I will love you with everything I have, even when everything I have doesn't feel like enough." The support group Patricia had introduced her to became her lifeline. These women understood struggle in ways her other friends couldn't. They'd been where she was. They knew what it felt like to be alone and afraid. My ex disappeared when I was 5 months pregnant, one woman shared. Left me with 2 kids already and another on the way. I was terrified. But you know what? We survived. My kids are grown now and they're beautiful and strong, and they don't even remember how hard those early years were. How did you do it? Carol asked. How did you keep going when everything felt impossible? One day at a time, sometimes 1 hour at a time. You do what you have to do because there's a tiny human depending on you. You find strength you didn't know you had. The woman reached over and squeezed Carol's hand. You're going to be okay. This baby is lucky to have you. Carol wanted to believe that, wanted to feel capable and strong, but mostly she just felt scared. She was 7 months along when her body started to truly rebel. Swelling so bad her ankles disappeared, headaches that wouldn't quit, blurred vision that made reading difficult. The doctor's face grew more concerned with each appointment. Carol, your blood pressure is dangerously high. Your protein levels are worrying. You're developing severe preeclampsia. What does that mean? It means you need to be on complete bed rest. No work, minimal activity. If this gets worse, we may need to deliver early. I can't afford not to work. I have bills. You can't afford to die either. And that's where this is headed if you don't take this seriously. The doctor's voice softened. I know this is hard. I know you're alone. But that baby needs you alive and healthy. Everything else is secondary. Carol had to call Mrs. Henderson and explain she couldn't come back to work, had to watch her tiny paycheck disappear, had to accept that she was now fully dependent on Bernice's charity. I'm so sorry, she told her sister through tears. Stop apologizing. We'll figure this out together. But Bernice was already stretched thin. Carol could see the exhaustion in her sister's face, the worry lines deepening. Bernice was working overtime to cover Carol's expenses, and the guilt was crushing. At night, Carol lay in bed with her hands on her belly and whispered prayers she wasn't sure anyone heard. Please let this baby be healthy. Please let me be strong enough. Please let us survive this. The baby would kick in response as if to say, I'm here. I'm fighting too. Carol cried herself to sleep most nights now. From fear, from exhaustion, from loneliness so profound it felt like drowning. Some nights, in her weakest moments, she thought about Ricky, wondered where he was, wondered if he ever thought about her, wondered if he was happy. She hated herself for still caring. After everything, after he'd chosen his career over her, after he'd let her go without a fight, after he'd signed those divorce papers like their marriage meant nothing, she still carried him in some broken corner of her heart. You need to let him go, Patricia told her at group one evening. You're about to be a mother. Your baby needs all of you. You can't keep carrying around a man who never deserved you in the first place. I know. I'm trying. Try harder. For your sake and your daughter's. Daughter. Carol was having a girl. She'd found out at the anatomy scan and cried for an hour. A little girl who would never know her father. A little girl who would grow up watching her mother struggle. A little girl who deserved so much better than what Carol could give her. She decided on a name, Hope, because that's what this baby represented. Hope that Carol could build something beautiful from the ruins of her life. Hope that love could exist even when surrounded by loss. Hope that somehow, some way, they would be okay. By her 8th month, Carol could barely walk, couldn't sleep more than 2 hours at a time, lived on antacids and prayer. Her body felt like a prison, and she counted down the days until she could meet this tiny person she'd been growing, this unexpected miracle that had saved her from completely giving up on life. Bernice had to help her shower, help her dress, help her do basic tasks that had become impossible. Carol had never felt more helpless, more vulnerable, more completely at the mercy of circumstances beyond her control. What if I can't do this? She whispered one night when the fear got too heavy. What if I'm not strong enough? You are, Bernice said firmly. You're the strongest person I know. But Carol didn't feel strong. She felt broken into so many pieces, she wasn't sure she'd ever be whole again. Across town, Ricky Fowler was experiencing his own kind of breaking. Tatiana's departure had left him facing truths he'd spent years avoiding. He'd achieved everything he'd set out to achieve. Chief of cardiac surgery, reputation as one of the best in the city, financial security, professional respect. Everything he'd told himself mattered, and he was emptier than he'd ever been. Work stopped being a refuge and became a reminder. Every successful surgery, every grateful patient, every accolade from colleagues, none of it touched the hollowness inside him. He'd climb into his car after saving someone's life and feel nothing, just exhaustion and an ache that wouldn't quit. Dr. Yates had stopped being subtle about his concern. "Ricky, you need help. Professional help. You're burning out." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're a shell. You go through the motions, but there's nothing behind your eyes anymore." Dr. Yates leaned forward. "When's the last time you did something that made you happy? Really happy?" Ricky couldn't remember the last time he'd felt joy or peace or anything other than this constant gnawing emptiness. "I thought you'd learned something from losing Carol," Dr. Yates continued. "But you're making the same mistakes. Different woman, same patterns. When are you going to figure out that running from your problems doesn't make them disappear?" "What am I supposed to do?" Carol's moved on. "I destroyed that relationship beyond repair. So make sure you don't destroy the next one, or the one after that. Learn from your mistakes, Ricky. Grow from them. Become a better man." But Ricky didn't know how to be a better man. Didn't know how to stop using work as an escape. Didn't know how to open his heart again after he'd sealed it shut to avoid feeling the pain of losing Carol. One night, unable to sleep, he drove past their old apartment. The lights were off. Different people lived there now. Different lives unfolding in rooms where he and Carol had once been happy. He thought about calling her. Thought about it every single day. But what would he say? "Sorry I destroyed the best thing in my life. Sorry I chose ambition over love. Sorry I'm too much of a coward to fix my mistakes." He drove home to his empty house, poured a drink he didn't want, and sat in the dark thinking about all the ways he'd failed. At love, at being human, at choosing what mattered. Success was supposed to feel like triumph. Instead, it felt like the world's loneliest prison. Chapter 6, Parallel Descents. Carol entered her final month of pregnancy, feeling like her body was actively trying to betray her. The swelling had become grotesque. Her feet were so puffy she could barely fit them into the one pair of shoes that still worked. Her face looked unfamiliar in the mirror, bloated and exhausted, with dark circles so deep they looked like bruises. She'd gained more weight than was healthy, but eating was one of the few comforts she had left. The headaches were constant now. Blinding, relentless pain that medication barely touched. She'd sit in Bernice's dim bedroom with a cold cloth over her eyes, praying for relief that rarely came. The doctor had warned her these were symptoms of worsening preeclampsia, that she needed to monitor them closely. If the headaches get worse, if you have vision changes, if you experience upper abdominal pain, you call me immediately, day or night. Carol nodded, memorizing symptoms she couldn't afford to ignore. Her vision had started doing strange things. Spots would float across her field of view. Sometimes things would blur for no reason. Once she'd looked at Bernice and seen two of her, the images overlapping like a photograph out of focus. "That's it," Bernice said when Carol finally admitted what was happening. "We're going to the hospital." "No, please, I can't afford another ER visit. Carol, you could be having a stroke. You could die." "I'm fine, it passed. I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. She was terrified. Terrified of her body failing her. Terrified of something happening to the baby. Terrified of dying and leaving her daughter motherless before she was even born. The financial stress had become a physical weight. Carol's baby fund jar was pathetically small. She'd bought almost nothing for the baby. A few second-hand onesies from yard sales, a pack of diapers, some bottles Bernice had found on clearance. She didn't have a car seat yet. Didn't have enough clothes. Didn't have half the things the parenting book said she needed. You know what babies really need. Patricia told her at support group. Love. Everything else you figure out as you go. Don't let capitalism convince you that you need $1,000 stroller to be a good mother. Carol wanted to believe that, but she felt like she was failing her daughter before she'd even taken her first breath. The library staff had thrown her a small baby shower. It was the kindest thing anyone had done for her in months. They'd given her practical gifts: diapers, wipes, gift cards to grocery stores. Mrs. Henderson had crocheted a beautiful blanket. Carol had cried through the entire party. "You're going to be a wonderful mother," Mrs. Henderson said, hugging her tight. "That baby is so lucky to have you." Carol didn't feel wonderful. She felt overwhelmed and unprepared and utterly terrified. She'd started having practice contractions, Braxton Hicks, the doctor called them. They'd grip her belly, make her gasp, then fade. Sometimes they'd wake her at night and she'd lie there in the dark wondering if this was it, if she was going into labor, if she was ready. She wasn't ready. It would never be ready. One night, when the contractions were particularly intense, Bernice found her crying in the bathroom. "What if I'm a terrible mother? What if I can't handle this? What if I'm too broken to raise a child?" "You're not broken, Carol, you're healing. There's a difference. Everything in my life is a mess. My ex-husband didn't want me. The father of my baby abandoned us. I'm living in your spare room with no money and a body that's falling apart. How am I supposed to raise a child when I can't even take care of myself?" Bernice knelt down and took Carol's face in her hands. "Listen to me. You are going to be an amazing mother. You know why? Because you already love that baby more than anything. Because you're willing to sacrifice everything for her. Because you're still standing even after everything that's tried to knock you down. That's what makes a good mother. Not money or a partner or a perfect life, just love. And you've got love in abundance." Carol wanted to believe her sister, wanted to feel capable and strong, but mostly she just felt scared out of her mind. By 34 weeks, her doctor's appointments had become weekly, then twice weekly. Every time the news was the same. Her blood pressure was too high. Her protein levels were concerning. The baby needed to stay inside longer. But Carol's body was saying time was running out. "If you go into labor before 37 weeks, we won't stop it," the doctor explained. "Your preeclampsia is too severe. Continuing the pregnancy poses risks to both you and the baby, but the baby needs more time. The baby needs a living mother. At 34 weeks, your daughter has excellent survival odds. You don't if we wait much longer." The weight of that statement settled over Carol like a shroud. She could die, actually die, leave her baby motherless before she ever got to hold her. That night, she wrote a letter to Hope, just in case something went wrong and she didn't make it. She wrote about how much she already loved her, how she was sorry for all the things she couldn't provide, how she hoped Hope would grow up knowing she was wanted and cherished and worth more than the circumstances of her birth. She sealed the letter and gave it to Bernice. "If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. If something happens, make sure she gets this. Make sure she knows I loved her." Bernice took the letter with tears streaming down her face. "You're going to give it to her yourself. When she's older, you're going to survive this." Carol wished she had her sister's certainty. Meanwhile, Ricky Fowler was spiraling in ways he didn't fully recognize. He'd stopped sleeping properly, would work until exhaustion forced him to lie down, then wake after a few restless hours and go back to the hospital. He'd lost weight, forgot to eat, forgot to do basic things like grocery shopping or paying bills on time. His house had become a place he slept occasionally, nothing more. The other surgeons had started to notice. They didn't say anything directly, but he caught the looks, the whispered conversations that stopped when he entered rooms. The way Dr. Yates watched him during procedures, like he was waiting for Ricky to crack. "You need time off," Dr. Yates told him after a particularly grueling surgery. "You're running on fumes." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You froze during that procedure. Just for a second, but I saw it. Your hands stopped moving. That's never happened to you before." Ricky had frozen, had been closing the incision when suddenly his hands went still, and for a terrifying moment he couldn't remember what he was supposed to do next. The moment passed quickly, but it had happened. I'm tired. That's all. You're more than tired, Ricky. You're burnt out. You're running yourself into the ground. At this rate, you're going to kill someone. Or yourself. What do you want me to do? Walk away from my patients? Abandon my responsibilities? I want you to remember that you're human, that you can't pour from an empty cup, that being a good doctor requires being a functional person first. But Ricky didn't know how to be a functional person anymore. Work was all he had, all he knew. Without it, he was just a hollow shell pretending to be a man. He'd started having dreams about Carol, not memories, but strange, vivid dreams where she was in danger and he couldn't reach her. He'd wake up with her name on his lips, heart pounding, reaching for someone who hadn't been there in years. One of the dreams was particularly disturbing. Carol was calling for him, crying out, but he was in surgery and couldn't leave. He could hear her voice getting weaker, more desperate, but the patient on his table kept bleeding and he couldn't stop it. He had to choose, save the patient or save Carol. He chose the patient. And when he finally finished, when he finally went looking for her, she was gone. He woke from that dream shaking, covered in cold sweat, with the overwhelming certainty that he'd made the wrong choice. Not just in the dream, but in life. Every single time he'd chosen wrong. Dr. Yates had been right. He needed help, professional help. But the thought of sitting in a therapist's office and admitting how completely he'd destroyed his life felt impossible. Easier to just keep working, keep moving, keep pretending he was fine. One evening he was updating patient files when a nurse mentioned a complicated pregnancy case that might need cardiac monitoring. Woman's in bad shape. Severe preeclampsia, no support system, barely hanging on. If she goes into early labor, it's going to be touch and go. Something about the description made Ricky's chest tighten, made him think of Carol, wonder where she was, wonder if she was okay. He hadn't seen her or heard about her in 3 years. For all he knew, she could be married with children, could be living her best life without him. He hoped she was. Hoped she'd found everything he'd failed to give her. But late at night, in his empty house, he'd look at the wedding photo he still kept in his desk drawer and wish things had been different. Wish he'd been different. Wish he could go back and make every choice over again. Some regrets don't fade with time. They just learn to live in your bones. He poured himself a drink he didn't really want and sat in the dark, thinking about all the ways a person could lose themselves. Could make choices that seemed right in the moment but destroyed everything that mattered. Could climb to the top of their profession and discover the view from there was just loneliness as far as the eye could see. His phone buzzed with a patient update. He answered immediately, grateful for something to focus on besides his own failures. Work, always work. It was all he had left. Chapter 7, The Gathering Storm. The storm arrived on a Tuesday morning, with weather forecasters using words like historic and catastrophic. Carol woke to rain hammering against the windows like fists demanding entry. The sky was black despite it being mid-morning, clouds rolling in with an anger that felt personal. Wind howled through the streets, bending trees and rattling shutters. Bernice came into the bedroom already dressed for work, her face worried. The news says to stay inside. Roads are flooding. You're not going to work in this, are you? I have to. We need the money. Bernice hesitated. Will you be okay alone? Carol nodded even though the thought terrified her. She'd been having contractions on and off all morning. Nothing regular, but present enough to keep her on edge. I'll be fine. Just hurry home. After Bernice left, the apartment felt too quiet despite the storm raging outside. Carol moved carefully through the small space, each step an effort. Her body felt wrong, heavy and strange, like something was winding up inside her, getting ready to spring. She tried to distract herself but couldn't focus on anything. She settled on the couch with her hands on her belly, talking softly to Hope. Just a few more weeks, baby girl. Stay in there just a few more weeks. The baby kicked hard, as if disagreeing. Around noon, the contractions changed. They stopped being random twinges and became something more insistent. Carol timed them, trying to stay calm. 8 minutes apart, then 7, then 6. No, she whispered, not yet. Please, not yet. She called the doctor's office. The answering service said Dr. Patterson was at the hospital dealing with emergencies. They advised Carol to come in if the contractions got closer together. Carol hung up and tried to breathe through another contraction. 5 minutes apart now, and painful. These were real. She called Bernice. Straight to voicemail. The storm must be interfering with cell service. Another contraction gripped her stronger this time. When it passed, she noticed something wet between her legs. Blood. Not a lot, but enough to send panic shooting through her. This wasn't normal. This was dangerous. She needed help. But the storm was raging. The roads were flooding, and she was completely alone. Carol called 911 with shaking hands. What's your emergency? I'm pregnant. 34 weeks. Contractions and bleeding. I need an ambulance. Ma'am, all our units are currently dispatched. Can you get to a hospital on your own? No, I can't drive. I'm alone and bleeding. Another contraction cut off her words. She doubled over, the phone falling from her hand. When she could speak again, she picked it up with trembling fingers. I'm dispatching an ambulance now, but response times are delayed. Stay on the line with me. Carol tried to focus through the fear. Told the dispatcher about the contractions, the bleeding, the preeclampsia. With each symptom, the dispatcher's voice became more urgent. The ambulance should be there as soon as possible. Stay on the line. How long? I can't give you an exact time, but help is coming. Carol slid down the bathroom wall to sit on the floor. Another contraction. Harder now, closer. She could feel her body changing, opening, getting ready whether she was ready or not. Time became strange. Seconds stretched into eternities between contractions, then collapsed into moments of blinding pain. They were close now, very close. Her body was taking over. When the doorbell finally rang, Carol almost cried with relief. She crawled to the door and opened it to find 2 paramedics in rain-soaked uniforms. Ma'am, I'm Diego and this is Shanice. Can you tell us what's happening? Carol tried to explain, but another contraction hit. When it passed, she was crying. Preeclampsia, she gasped. 34 weeks, bleeding, contractions 3 minutes apart. The paramedics exchanged looks that weren't good. They moved quickly, getting her onto a stretcher, taking vitals. We need to get you to a hospital immediately, Diego said. Can you hold on? Carol nodded, but she wasn't sure. Wasn't sure her body would wait. The ambulance ride was a nightmare. Every bump sent agony through her. Sirens wailed. Rain pounded the roof. Diego worked over her, checking monitors, talking into his radio. Blood pressure critical. Baby's in distress. We need the OR ready when we arrive. Baby in distress. The words punched through Carol's pain. Is she okay? Is my baby okay? We're doing everything we can. Just stay with us. Through the windows, Carol could see the flooded streets, the darkened buildings, the storm intent on destroying everything. Lightning cracked across the sky. The world was ending, and her daughter was trying to be born into it. Shanice held Carol's hand. You're doing great. Keep breathing. I can't, Carol sobbed. It hurts too much. Yes, you can. That baby needs you to be strong. Carol thought about the letter she'd written to Hope, thought about how unfair it would be for Hope to enter a world where her mother didn't survive. Please, she whispered. Please let us both live through this. The ambulance pulled up to Memorial Grace Hospital with a screech of brakes. Doors flew open. Hands reached for her. Voices shouted medical terms she didn't understand. They wheeled her through automatic doors into bright lights. Nurses surrounded her. Someone was cutting off her clothes. Someone else inserted an IV. Monitors beeped urgent warnings. Carol caught fragments of conversation. Through the pain, placental abruption, blood pressure, critical, the baby's heart rate. Dropping, get the OR ready. Where's the attending surgeon? And then, through it all, a voice Carol hadn't heard in 3 years. Calm, authoritative, unmistakable. I'm here. What do we have? Carol's eyes flew open. Through tear-blurred vision, she saw him. Ricky Fowler, standing in the doorway, scrubbing in. his face set in concentration. Their eyes met. Time stopped. Every emotion Carol had buried for 3 years crashed over her at once. Shock, disbelief, fear, and underneath it all, something she'd tried so hard to kill. Love. Broken and battered, but still beating. Carol. His voice cracked on her name. She tried to speak, but another contraction ripped through her, stronger than anything before. She screamed, heard monitors alarming, heard someone shouting they were losing the baby's heartbeat. And then Ricky was there, beside her, his hands on her shoulders, his face close to hers. "Carol, look at me. I need you to stay with me. I'm going to save you both. Do you understand? I'm going to save you." Carol wanted to ask him so many things, but all she could do was nod. "Trust him. I need her in OR2 immediately," Ricky barked orders. "Call neonatal intensive care. Get me anesthesia stat, move." They wheeled Carol down a hallway, ceiling lights flashing past, Ricky's voice cutting through the chaos. Carol felt her consciousness starting to slip, the pain becoming distant, the world going fuzzy. "Stay with me," Ricky's voice. Carol, stay with me. She wanted to stay, wanted to fight, but her body was shutting down. "Hope," she whispered. "Her name is Hope. Promise me you're going to tell her yourself. Stay with me, Carol, please." But the darkness was pulling her under, and Carol stopped fighting. Chapter 8. When Fate Collides. Ricky Fowler had performed emergency surgeries under pressure before. Lives hanging in the balance, seconds making the difference between survival and death. His hands steady while chaos swirled around him. It was what he did, what he'd trained for, what he was known for. But he'd never operated on someone he loved. His hands shook as he scrubbed in. Actually shook, something that hadn't happened since his internship. Dr. Yates appeared beside him, already in surgical gear. "Ricky, you can't do this surgery. She's my patient. She's your ex-wife. You're emotionally compromised. Let me take lead." "No." Ricky's voice came out harder than he intended. "She's dying. Her baby's dying. I'm the best cardiac surgeon in this hospital, and she needs the best. I can do this." Dr. Yates studied him for a long moment. "If you freeze even for a second, I won't. If your emotions override your training, they won't. I can save her, Jonas. I have to save her." Dr. Yates nodded slowly. "Then I'm assisting, and if I see you losing focus for even a moment, I'm taking over." No arguments. They entered the OR where Carol lay unconscious on the table. Monitors screamed warnings. Nurses moved with urgent efficiency. The anesthesiologist looked grim. Blood pressures dropping. Baby's heart rate critical. "We need to move now." Ricky took his position, looked down at Carol's face. Pale, peaceful in unconsciousness, so different from the vibrant woman he'd married. Pregnancy had changed her. Suffering had changed her. He'd changed her by breaking her heart. "I'm sorry," he whispered too quietly for anyone to hear. "I'm so sorry for everything." Then he pushed every emotion down into a box and locked it tight. Carol needed a surgeon right now, not a man consumed by regret. She needed precision and skill and absolute focus. She needed him to be the best version of himself he'd ever been. He picked up the scalpel. "Let's save them both." The first incision was clean, perfect. Muscle memory taking over. His hands moved with the precision of thousands of hours of practice. But underneath the calm exterior, his mind was screaming. This was Carol, his Carol, the woman he'd loved and lost, the woman whose smile had once made his entire world bright, the woman he'd destroyed with his ambition and stupidity. And now she was under his blade, her life literally in his hands. "More suction," he ordered. "Heart rate? Dropping. Baby's in severe distress. Time to delivery. We need her out in the next 2 minutes or we lose her." 2 minutes. 120 seconds to bring Carol's daughter into the world alive. Ricky worked faster, every movement deliberate. The uterus was in sight. He made the incision carefully. Too rough and he could damage the baby. Too slow and she wouldn't survive. "I see the head. Almost there." His hands were inside Carol's body, reaching for her child, doing something so intimate it felt like a violation of every boundary they'd established when they signed divorce papers. But there was no time for philosophical debate. Only action. He lifted the baby free. A tiny girl, grey and lifeless, not breathing, cords wrapped around her neck. "Clamp!" He worked quickly, cutting the cord, passing the infant to the neonatal team. They rushed her to the warming station, starting resuscitation. Ricky forced himself not to watch. Carol was still in danger. Massive bleeding had started. The placental abruption was severe. "I need more hands over here. She's hemorrhaging." Blood, so much blood. Carol's blood. Dr. Yates moved in beside him. "Ricky, I've got this." But did he? The bleeding was catastrophic. Every vessel he clamped, another started gushing. This was the complication that killed mothers. This was why maternal mortality existed despite modern medicine. Sometimes the body just broke beyond what could be fixed. "No," Ricky muttered. "Not her, not today." He sutured with a speed and precision born of desperation, found the source of the worst bleeding and sealed it. Then another, then another. It was like trying to hold back a flood with his bare hands. Behind him, he could hear the neonatal team working on the baby. Heard them say, "Still not breathing," and "No." Heartbeat detected. Heard the urgency in their voices. Carol's daughter was dying, while Carol herself bled out on the table. Ricky felt the edges of panic starting to creep in. His vision tunneled. His breathing became shallow. This was too much. He couldn't save them both. He was going to lose Carol the same way he'd lost her before, by not being enough. "Ricky?" Dr. Yates' voice cut through. "Focus, right here. This vessel, see it?" Ricky blinked. Saw what he'd missed. Got it. They worked in tandem now, Dr. Yates anticipating what Ricky needed before he asked for it. They'd performed hundreds of surgeries together over the years. Their rhythm was perfect, practiced, almost telepathic. Blood pressure stabilizing, the anesthesiologist called out. "Bleeding's under control," Ricky confirmed. "How's the baby?" "Still working on her." "Work faster!" He closed Carol's incision with meticulous care. Every suture had to be perfect. Every layer closed properly. She would survive this surgery. He would make sure of it. "She's stable," Dr. Yates said finally. "You did it." But Ricky didn't feel victorious. Not while Carol's daughter was still silent. He moved to the warming station, where the neonatal team continued resuscitation efforts on the tiny infant. She was so small, so fragile, perfectly formed but not breathing. "Come on," Ricky whispered. "Fight, little one. Your mother needs you. Don't give up." The team worked with desperate efficiency, suctioning, stimulating, administering medication. Seconds ticked by, feeling like hours, and then a gasp. Weak and thready, but unmistakable. The baby's chest rose, fell, rose again. "We've got respiratory effort." Her color changed from gray to pink, her tiny fists unclenched. And then, cutting through the tension in the room like a knife, came a sound Ricky would remember for the rest of his life. The first cry of Carol's daughter. Weak, warbling, but alive. So impossibly, miraculously alive. The neonatal team burst into action, stabilizing her, getting her into an incubator. Preparing to move her to the NICU, Dr. Yates gripped Ricky's shoulder. "You saved them both. Against impossible odds, you saved them both." Ricky looked at Carol still unconscious on the table, then at the tiny baby being wheeled away to intensive care. He'd done what he'd promised, saved them both. But at what cost to his own sanity? "I need a minute," he said quietly. He left the OR, stripped off his blood-soaked gloves and gown, and found himself in an empty hallway. His legs gave out. He slid down the wall to sit on the cold floor, head in his hands, shaking. He'd almost lost her, almost watched Carol die right in front of him, almost failed the only woman he'd ever truly loved when she needed him most. "Dr. Fowler." A nurse appeared. "The patient is being moved to recovery. And there's a woman in the waiting room asking about her. Says she's the sister?" "Bernice." "Tell her Carol and the baby both survived. Tell her they're in critical but stable condition." Ricky stood on unsteady legs. "I'll go speak with her in a moment." But he needed to see Carol first. Needed to confirm with his own eyes that she was alive and breathing. In recovery, Carol lay pale and still, monitors beeping steady rhythms. Ricky pulled up a chair and sat beside her bed, reached out but stopped before touching her hand. What right did he have to touch her now? "You scared me," he whispered. 3 years without seeing you, and then you show up dying on my table. Do you know what that did to me?" She didn't answer. Unconscious, peaceful, unaware that the man who'd broken her heart had just saved her life. "I thought I was over you. Thought I'd moved on. But the second I saw you in that emergency room, I knew the truth. I never stopped loving you, Carol. I never will. I was just too much of a coward to admit it." He stood to leave before he said something he couldn't take back. But at the door he paused. "Your daughter is beautiful, just like you. And you're going to be an amazing mother. I'm sorry I won't be there to see it." He walked away before his resolve could crumble, before he could do something foolish like stay. Carol deserved better than him. Always had. In the waiting room, Bernice jumped up when she saw him. "Is she okay? Is the baby okay?" "They're both alive. Both stable. Carol's in recovery and the baby's in the NICU. She's small, but she's a fighter." Bernice burst into tears. Thank God. Can I see her?" "Soon. The nurses will come get you when she's ready for visitors." "Dr. Fowler." Bernice hesitated. "Did Carol know it was you? Did she know you were the one operating?" "She saw me right before she went under. What are the odds? Of all the hospitals, of all the doctors." Fate has a cruel sense of humor. Ricky turned to leave. "Wait. I think you should know something." "She never stopped." "Don't." Ricky held up his hand. "Whatever you're about to say, please don't. I saved her life tonight. That has to be enough. It has to be." He walked away before Bernice could finish, before hope could take root in his chest, before he could start imagining a future that didn't belong to him anymore. Carol had moved on, built a new life, had a baby with another man. Ricky had lost his chance 3 years ago when he'd chosen his career over his marriage. Tonight was just a coincidence of fate, nothing more. But as he drove home through streets still flooded from the storm, he couldn't stop thinking about the way Carol had looked at him. In that moment before she went under, recognition, fear, and something else he couldn't name but desperately wanted to. Maybe she hated him for everything he'd done. Or maybe, just maybe, somewhere in her broken heart, a tiny piece still remembered what they'd once meant to each other. It didn't matter. It couldn't matter. Carol deserved happiness, and Ricky had proven 3 years ago that he wasn't capable of giving her that. The best thing he could do now was stay away. But God, staying away hurt worse than anything he'd ever felt. Chapter 9. The Weight of Truth. Carol woke to a world of pain. Everything hurt. Her body. Her head, the very act of breathing felt like knives in her chest. She tried to move and couldn't, tried to speak and managed only a croak. Monitors beeped beside her and fluorescent lights burned her eyes. "Easy, honey. Don't try to move yet." Bernice's face appeared above her, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're okay. You're going to be okay. The baby..." Carol's voice was raw, barely a whisper. "She's alive. She's in the NICU, but she's alive and fighting. 3 pounds, 2 ounces of pure determination." Carol started crying. Couldn't stop. Relief and fear and exhaustion all pouring out in shuddering sobs that made her incisions scream with pain. "I want to see her. Soon. The doctor said you need to rest a little longer. You lost a lot of blood. They had to give you transfusions." Carol's hand moved to her stomach, feeling the bandages, the flatness where her daughter had been. "What happened?" "I remember the ambulance. I remember pain. And then..." She stopped, remembered something else, something impossible. "Ricky." His name fell from her lips like a prayer and a curse. "I saw Ricky. Did I hallucinate that?" Bernice's expression confirmed it was real. He was the surgeon on duty. "He saved your life, Carol. You were bleeding out, and the baby wasn't breathing, and he brought you both back." The room spun. Of all the hospitals, all the doctors, fate had placed her life in Ricky Fowler's hands. The man who'd broken her heart had saved her and her daughter. The universe had a twisted sense of poetry. Is he here? No, he operated, stayed until you were stable, then left. I haven't seen him since. Of course he'd left. That's what Ricky did. Saved lives, then walked away. Carol should have expected nothing different. I need to see my baby. I'll get the nurse. It took another hour before they could wheel Carol to the NICU. She was weak, barely able to sit up, but determination pushed her through the pain. Nothing, not surgery, not exhaustion, not the ache of seeing Ricky again, would keep her from her daughter. The NICU was a maze of incubators and monitors, and tiny, fragile lives fighting to survive. A nurse led Carol to an incubator near the back. Inside, beneath warming lights and surrounded by wires, was the smallest person Carol had ever seen. Hope, her daughter. A miracle. "She's beautiful," Carol whispered, pressing her hand against the plastic barrier between them. "Can I touch her?" "Of course. Wash your hands first." Carol reached through the portals in the incubator and touched Hope's tiny hand. Impossibly small fingers wrapped around Carol's pinky, and something in Carol's chest broke open. This was her baby, this tiny, perfect person who'd survived against terrible odds, who'd fought to live just as hard as Carol had fought to bring her into the world. "Hi, Hope," Carol whispered through tears. "I'm your mama. I'm so sorry it was so hard. I'm so sorry I couldn't give you an easier start. But you're here now, and you're alive, and I promise you, I promise, I'm going to give you the best life I can." The nurse stood nearby, respectful but watchful. She's doing remarkably well for her gestational age, breathing on her own, good muscle tone, responding to stimuli. "Your daughter's a fighter. She gets that from her mother," Bernice said, standing behind Carol's wheelchair. Carol spent an hour at the incubator just watching Hope breathe, counting her impossibly tiny fingers and toes, memorizing the perfect shape of her face, falling completely, irrevocably in love. When exhaustion finally forced her back to her room, Carol felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, actual hope. Not just her daughter's name, but the feeling itself. Maybe they would be okay. Maybe they could survive this. Over the next few days, Carol's body began the slow process of healing. She shuffled through the hospital hallways, pushing through pain to visit Hope in the NICU. Each day, her daughter grew stronger, took to feeding, maintained body temperature, hit all the milestones the neonatologists watched for. But Carol's emotional healing was more complicated. Every time she saw a doctor walk by, her heart would jump, thinking it might be Ricky. But he never came. Never checked on her, never stopped by to see how she was recovering or how Hope was doing. It was like that night in the OR had never happened. "Has Dr. Fowler asked about her?" Carol asked one of the nurses. "Not that I've heard, but different doctors handle different cases. He's probably just moved on to other patients." Moved on. Of course he had. That's what Ricky did best, move on. Carol tried to focus on what mattered: her recovery, her daughter, the logistics of being a new mother. Bernice brought clothes and toiletries. The hospital social worker helped Carol apply for additional assistance programs. The NICU nurses taught her how to care for a premature baby. But late at night, when the hospital was quiet and Carol lay awake in her bed, she thought about Ricky, about the look in his eyes when he'd seen her in the emergency room, about his voice promising to save her, about the fact that he'd kept that promise, then walked away without a word. "I'm so confused," Carol told Patricia when her support group friend came to visit. "He saved my life, saved Hope's life. But he couldn't even be bothered to check on us afterward. Maybe it was too painful for him. Seeing you, being reminded of everything he lost. He didn't lose me. He threw me away." Did he, though? Or did he just not know how to hold on? Carol didn't have an answer for that. A week after the surgery, Carol was cleared to go home. Hope would need to stay in the NICU for at least another few weeks, but Carol could visit daily. It felt wrong to leave without her baby, but the doctors assured her it was normal, necessary, part of Hope's journey to getting strong enough to come home. As the nurse wheeled Carol toward the exit, she passed Dr. Yates in the hallway. He stopped when he saw her. "Miss Simon, I'm glad to see you up and mobile. Thank you, Dr. Yates, for assisting with the surgery, for helping save us." "I only assisted. Dr. Fowler did the heavy lifting." He hesitated, then added, "He's a brilliant surgeon, but seeing you on that table, it destroyed him in ways I've never seen. He hasn't been the same since." Carol didn't know what to do with that information. "Is he avoiding me?" "I think he's trying to do what he thinks is right. Staying away so you can heal without the complication of him being around. That's not his choice to make." "No, but it's the one he made anyway." Dr. Yates smiled sadly. "For what it's worth, I've never seen him care about a patient the way he cared about you that night. He would have died himself before he let you die." After he walked away, Carol sat in her wheelchair thinking about Ricky, about love and regret, and the impossible complexity of two people who destroyed something beautiful and didn't know how to rebuild it. That evening, back at Bernice's apartment, Carol found herself pulling out old photos from her marriage. Pictures of her and Ricky when they were happy, when love had felt simple and forever had seemed possible. "What are you doing?" Bernice asked, finding her sister surrounded by memories. "Trying to remember who we were, before everything fell apart." "Does it matter? He's gone, Carol. He saved your life, then walked away again, just like he always does." "But what if—" Carol stopped. What was she thinking? That Ricky had changed? That 3 years and 1 surgery could undo all the damage they'd caused each other? What if what? Nothing. "You're right. It doesn't matter." But it did matter. It mattered so much that Carol couldn't sleep that night. Couldn't stop thinking about the way Ricky had looked at her. Couldn't stop hearing Dr. Yates saying it destroyed him. What if Ricky wasn't avoiding her because he didn't care? What if he was avoiding her because he cared too much? The thought was dangerous. Carol had spent 3 years learning to live without him. 3 years building walls around her heart. 3 years convincing herself she was better off alone. She couldn't let one surgery, one moment of crisis, tear down everything she'd built. But in the quiet darkness of Bernice's guest room, with her hand pressed against her healing incision, Carol admitted a truth she'd been avoiding. She still loved him, despite everything. Despite the abandonment and the divorce and the years of loneliness. Despite Jerome's betrayal and her own broken promises to never trust a man again. Despite every rational reason to hate Ricky Fowler and everything he represented, she still loved him, and she had no idea what to do about it. Across town, Ricky sat in his empty house doing exactly the same thing, staring at old photos, remembering what they'd been, wondering if there was any possible path back to something like that. He'd been to the NICU multiple times, but always when he knew Carol wouldn't be there. He'd checked on Hope, perfect, tiny, fighting Hope, and felt his heart break a little more each time. This could have been his daughter, if he'd been a better husband, if he'd chosen differently, if he'd fought for Carol instead of letting her walk away. But regrets didn't change reality. Carol had moved on, built a new life, had a baby with someone else. Ricky had no place in that picture. The kindest thing he could do was stay away, even if staying away was killing him. Dr. Yates found him in the hospital cafeteria at midnight, staring at cold coffee. "You need to talk to her." "No, Ricky, I saved her life." "That's enough. That has to be enough." "Does it?" "Because from where I'm standing, you both look miserable. She's better off without me. We proved that 3 years ago. You proved that you were young and stupid and didn't know how to balance your life. That doesn't mean you couldn't figure it out now." Ricky laughed bitterly. "I'm the reason she's a single mother. I destroyed our marriage so completely that she went looking for love in the wrong places and ended up pregnant and alone. How exactly do I come back from that? By being honest, by telling her the truth. Which is what? That I'm sorry. That I regret everything? That I'd give anything for another chance?" Ricky shook his head. "She doesn't want to hear that. And even if she did, words don't fix what I broke. Then show her. With actions. Be the man she needed you to be 3 years ago." "It's too late for that." Dr. Yates stood to leave. "Maybe. Or maybe it's exactly the right time. But you won't know unless you try. After he left, Ricky sat alone in the empty cafeteria, thinking about Carol and Hope and the life he'd chosen to walk away from. Maybe Dr. Yates was right. Maybe it was time to stop running. Or maybe some mistakes were too big to ever fix, and the kindest thing he could do was leave Carol in peace. He didn't know, and not knowing was the most painful thing of all. Chapter 10, The Second Heartbeat. 3 weeks crawled by like 3 lifetimes. Carol lived in a strange limbo between the hospital and Bernice's apartment. Every morning she'd wake before dawn and take the bus to Memorial Grace. She'd spend hours in the NICU, hands through the incubator portals, talking to Hope about everything, reading her stories, singing lullabies off-key, promising her a better life. Hope was thriving, growing stronger each day. The nurses called her their little miracle, born too early, too small, under the worst circumstances, yet fighting like a champion. She'd graduated from the incubator to an open crib, started taking full feedings. All the milestones that meant soon, very soon, Carol could take her home. Home. The word felt hollow. Bernice's guest room wasn't home. It was borrowed space, a reminder that Carol had nothing of her own to offer her daughter. But she was trying, working with social services to find affordable housing, making plans to return to work once Hope was settled, building a life from scratch. What she wasn't doing was thinking about Ricky Fowler, except she thought about him constantly. Every time a doctor walked into the NICU, her heart would leap. Every voice in the hallway made her turn, but Ricky never came. Carol told herself it was better this way. They'd had their moment of crisis, and he'd saved her life, and now they could both move on. No complicated conversations, no reopening wounds. But late at night, when she couldn't sleep, Carol would touch the scar on her belly and think about Ricky's hands. How they'd been inside her body, literally holding her life together. How for one night he'd been everything she'd ever needed him to be. "You're torturing yourself," Bernice said. "If you want to talk to him, just call." And say what? How about the truth, that you still love him? Carol's head snapped up. Please, I'm your sister. You think one abandoned pregnancy erased what you felt for him? He doesn't want me, Bernie. He proved that when he signed those divorce papers. He proved it again when he vanished. Or maybe he thinks you don't want him. Maybe he's staying away to let you be happy. That's stupid. Is it? You're both miserable and both too stubborn to do anything about it. Carol pulled a blanket tighter. I have Hope to think about now. I can't risk my heart on a man who already broke it once. What kind of mother would you be if you taught her to run from love, because it might be hard? The words hit deeper than Carol wanted to admit. She'd spent 3 years running, and where had it gotten her? Maybe it was time to stop running. The next morning, Carol went to the NICU earlier than usual. Hope was awake, staring with those unfocused newborn eyes. "Good morning, baby girl," Carol whispered. "Mama's got something to tell you. I think I need to be brave, because you deserve a mother who fights for what matters." Talking to yourself? Carol spun around. Ricky Fowler stood in the doorway, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Dark circles under his eyes, rumpled scrubs, but still him. "What are you doing here?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "I could ask you the same thing. It's barely 6 in the morning." "I come early, when it's quiet." Carol turned back to Hope. "You've been avoiding me." "Yes." At least he was honest. "Why?" "Because seeing you hurts. Because I don't have the right to be part of your life anymore. Because every time I look at you, I'm reminded of every way I failed you." He moved closer. "And because I didn't trust myself not to say things I have no business saying." "Like what?" Ricky was quiet for so long Carol thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Like I'm sorry, like I've regretted every day of the last 3 years, like seeing you on that table made me realize I never stopped loving you, like I'd give anything for another chance." Carol's breath caught. "You can't just say things like that." "I know. That's why I stayed away." For 3 weeks, Ricky. 3 weeks I've been coming here every day and you avoided me. I was trying to do the right thing. Trying to let you move on without me complicating everything. That's not your choice to make. Carol's voice rose, making Hope startle. She lowered it. You don't get to decide what's best for me. You don't get to save my life, then disappear. What else am I supposed to do, Carol? You have a baby. A life. You've moved on. Moved on? Are you kidding me? Carol laughed, bitter. I've been in pieces for 3 years. I tried with Jerome. Look how that turned out. That's not your fault. I know it's not. But it's also not a coincidence that I chose a man who would leave me, just like you did. Because somewhere deep down, I was still so angry at you. She wiped angry tears. And then you show up when I'm dying, and you save me, and I wake up, and you're gone, and I don't know what to do with any of it. Ricky looked shattered. Carol, I'm so sorry. For all of it. You deserved better than me then, and you deserve better now. Stop telling me what I deserve. Carol's hands shook. You want to know what I deserve? I deserve honesty. I deserve someone who shows up. I deserve a man who can tell me the truth. The truth? Ricky's voice cracked. The truth is I love you. I've loved you every single day since you left. I loved you when you were on that operating table. I love you now, knowing I have no right to. That's the truth, Carol. Are you? Carol stepped closer. Are you still that man? Or have you learned anything in 3 years? I'd like to think I've learned. I've scaled back my hours, stopped using work as an escape, started actually living. But talk is cheap. Then show me. Carol's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Stop talking and show me. Ricky looked at her like she'd handed him the world. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm terrified. I'm saying you broke my heart and I don't know if I can survive you breaking it again. I'm saying I have a daughter now and I can't be reckless. Carol took a shaky breath, but I'm also saying that I never stopped loving you either. And maybe we could try again. Slowly. Carefully. Carol. But I need to know something first. She looked up at him. When you look at Hope, do you see Jerome's baby? Or do you see a child who could be yours to love? Ricky moved to the incubator, looked down at Hope. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. I see a miracle. I see your strength and courage. I see a little girl who's going to grow up knowing she's loved beyond measure. He turned back. And if you'd let me, I'd like to be part of that love. Not as her biological father, that's a truth she deserves to know, but as someone who's there, who shows up. Carol walked to him, stood so close she could see the pulse jumping in his throat. If we do this, it can't be like before. I won't be invisible again. You'll never have to wait. You'll never be second. I'll spend every day proving that you and Hope come first. Always. And if it gets hard, if we fight, then we face them together. We talk. We don't run. Ricky reached out slowly. When she didn't pull away, he cupped her face. I can't promise perfect, Carol, but I can promise present. I can promise to fight for us. That's a big promise. It's the only one that matters. Carol closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the moment. This was it. The choice that would define everything. She could protect her heart, stay safe, raise Hope alone, or she could be brave. She thought about what she'd told Hope that morning, about fighting for what matters. Okay, she whispered. Okay, we try, but slowly, Ricky. However slow you need, I'll wait as long as it takes. Carol opened her eyes and looked at him. Saw the fear and hope and love written across his face, saw a man who'd made terrible mistakes and was begging for a chance to make them right. I need to know one more thing. Her voice trembled. Why did you let me go? When I left 3 years ago, why didn't you fight for me? Ricky's hands dropped. Because I thought success mattered more than love. because I was so consumed by my career that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. He looked at her with eyes full of regret. I didn't fight because I didn't understand what I was losing until it was already gone. You almost did destroy it. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life making up for that, if you'll let me. Carol turned back to Hope's incubator. Her daughter, their daughter now, if this gamble paid off, slept peacefully. I can't do this alone, Carol said quietly, raising her. I need help, real help. You'll have it, whatever you need. I'm living in my sister's spare room with no money and mountains of debt. This isn't going to be some fairy tale. I know. And hope comes first, always. If being with me means being a father to her, then you need to be sure. Ricky reached through the incubator portal and touched Hope's tiny hand. I held her first breath in my hands, Carol. I watched her fight to live. I already love this little girl, I'm sure. Carol felt something crack open in her chest. Not breaking, but opening, like ice thawing after a long winter. This is crazy, she whispered. Completely. We failed once already. We were different people then. What if we fail again? Ricky turned to face her fully. Then at least we'll fail together, and maybe, just maybe, we'll figure out how to build something better, something stronger, because it's been broken and put back together. Carol pulled the wedding ring from her pocket, the ring she'd been carrying around, unable to put it on or throw it away. I'm not ready to wear this yet, she said. Maybe I never will be. Maybe we'll need new rings, new vows, but I'm keeping it. As a reminder. Ricky looked at the ring, then at her face. What are you saying? I'm saying yes. To trying, to seeing if we can be better, to letting you be part of Hope's life, part of my life, to being terrified but brave enough to try anyway. The smile that broke across Ricky's face was like sunrise after the longest night. Thank you, God, Carol, thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me in a year when you're changing diapers at 3 in the morning and life is a disaster. I'll still be thanking you then. Every day. Carol let herself smile. That's a long time. Not long enough. They stood there in the quiet NICU, 2 broken people standing in the rubble trying to figure out how to rebuild. So what happens now? Carol asked. Now I take you to breakfast. Then I help you navigate social services. Then I go to work, but I come back tonight and take you to dinner. A real dinner where we talk. That sounds terrifying. Good terrifying or bad terrifying? Both. Definitely both. I can work with both. They walked out together side by side, but not touching, taking it slow. 2 people learning how to navigate the space between them. In the cafeteria, over coffee and toast, they talked. About the changes he'd made. About her pregnancy. About Jerome's abandonment. About painting again. About rediscovering themselves. They talked for 2 hours. When Ricky had to leave for rounds, he paused. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you name her Hope? Carol smiled, sad and beautiful. Because that's what she gave me. When everything was dark, I found out I was pregnant. And despite everything, she made me feel hope again. Hope that life could still be beautiful. Ricky's eyes were bright with tears. She was right. You do deserve good things, Carol. You always did. After he left, Carol sat alone with her coffee, turning the ring over in her hands. She didn't know what the future held, didn't know if they could make it work. But for the first time in 3 years, she felt hope. 3 weeks later, Carol brought Hope home. Not to Bernice's apartment, but to a small house Ricky had helped her find. Nothing fancy, just 2 bedrooms with a yard that needed work. But it was theirs. Ricky came by that first evening with dinner. He stayed late, helping with the crib, talking quietly. He didn't stay the night, didn't push. Just kissed Carol's cheek and promised to come back tomorrow, and he did. Every day he came back, helped with feedings, changed diapers, read books, Showed up when he said he would. It wasn't perfect. There were hard conversations, tears, arguments, moments when Carol would panic, times when Ricky would retreat into old patterns, but they worked through it, together. 6 months after the surgery, on a quiet evening when Hope was asleep and they sat eating takeout, Carol finally put the ring back on, not as a wedding ring. Not yet, but as a promise, a symbol of possibility. Ricky noticed immediately, took her hand gently. Does this mean? It means I'm ready to try for real, not dating, but actually trying to build a life together. You, me, and Hope, a family. Carol, I'm still scared. You hurt me so badly, Ricky. But I love you. I've loved you through everything. And I think maybe we've earned a second chance. Ricky pulled her close, and Carol let him. I won't waste it, he whispered. I promise you, I know, because if you do, I'll break your heart this time. He laughed, and she laughed, and for the first time in forever, it felt like they might actually be okay. In the nursery, Hope stirred in her sleep, and in that small house, 2 broken people held each other and dared to believe in the impossible. That love, once shattered, could be pieced back together. That second chances were real. That sometimes the heart needs to break completely before it can learn to beat properly again. The end. But in that moment, neither Carol nor Ricky knew that their story was just beginning, and that the hardest tests of whether they'd truly changed were still ahead, waiting in the ordinary moments of shared life. In the quiet choice to stay when leaving would be easier. In the daily decision to love even when love demanded everything they had to give.